I definitely did not have a reboot slash prequel slash origin story of the 1980s comedy Fletch starring Chevy Chase on my 2022 movie bingo card. But here we are. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Before we get started, click on the red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new piece of content. Okay, so Confess Fletch. I didn't know this movie was coming out. I didn't know it was getting made. I didn't know people still talked about the original Fletch. I didn't know that anybody still gave a rip about the character. I don't think... I don't know of any like Gen Z person that even knows about Fletch. It's not one of those comedies that's considered like a classic by any stretch. I mean, I'm sure it is for some people, but it's not one of those movies that everybody knows about. People who grew up in that era certainly do, but younger people absolutely don't. Fletch is not something that just gets talked about a lot. And yet, this movie kind of fell out of nowhere for me. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know it was getting made until it was out, basically. And I was pleasantly surprised by it. I'm a huge fan of Greg Mottola, who directed the film, and I love Superbad. That's the movie I think of first when I think of Mottola, and I adore that movie. And there's some similarities that this has to that I'll get into. But this movie's great. And it's... The original Fletch was really driven by Chevy Chase, right? He's obviously a huge part of what made that movie successful. When they filmed that movie, they basically did 2 takes of the original Fletch. They did one where it was like, here's the script, and then they did one where, okay, Chevy is just gonna improv and do everything by ear and just ad-lib the entire thing. And then they stitched those together to make the movie, and you can kind of tell when you watch it. A lot of that movie is just Chevy Chase being Chevy Chase, and the story is kind of just irrelevant. This movie is very different. John Hamm is a different type of actor. This movie is much more of like a scripted, here's all these funny jokes that we've written for you, now you're gonna go out and say them. This movie is not one that seems like everything is improvised and made up on the spot by the main actor. That said, similar to Superbad, this is also kind of a bit of an ensemble film, right? It's got a lot of side characters that are great. It's got Fletch's girlfriend's mother-in-law or stepmom is really funny. His old boss at like generic Boston newspaper is hysterical and steals every scene he's in. And so, while yes, this is a movie about the character of Fletch as he attempts to clear his name for a murder he clearly didn't commit, all of these other characters really make the movie excel, and they make it genuinely funny. And I think that's one thing that surprised me about this, is that Hamm is asked to carry a lot of the film, but not all of the film. And those side characters have some amazing moments, and I think that's what I really like about this film, is that, yeah, it's a Fletch movie, but it's so much more than that. And is it like gonna be a classic comedy? No, it's one of the funniest movies of 2022. It really is. I loved it. Basically what happens is Fletch is a former investigative journalist, and he is trying to figure out why there's a dead girl in the basement of the house he's living in. It's like an Airbnb, and he shows up, and there's a dead woman in the basement, and he calls the cops, and he's trying to clear his name because he's the person in the house. He's the only person who could even be considered a suspect, and so the movie just kind of plays off of that, and it's not going to win any awards for its story. The mystery itself isn't all that interesting. You know, there's stolen artwork and, European billionaires and millionaires and all this stuff, and none of that stuff is really all that interesting. What is interesting is all of the characters and all of the jokes that surround that. The mystery itself, not all that interesting, but the jokes themselves really, really are. This is a genuinely funny movie. Came out of nowhere for me. Really loved it. Kind of want to watch it again, see what I missed. But yeah, Confess Fletch, big fan. John Hamm, not the guy I would have thought of to play this role. And so when I read that, and when I saw like a new Fletch movie was out, and he was the main character, I was a little bit surprised, a little bit taken aback. Not who I would cast, but he's great. He's a smarmy, arrogant jerk in this movie, and it's great, and it totally works, and he plays the part well. So I really like Confess Fletch, and you should probably check it out. It's pretty good. Thanks so much for checking out the video. If you liked it, found it helpful, consider subscribing. You can also like and share the video. That tells the powers that be that it's worth promoting. And hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think of Confess Fletch, and I'll see you next Wednesday, 9 a.m.